I wanna respond quickly to this post by the psychopath David Wood. He said, Muhammad said Jews and Christians still have the Torah and the gospel. Muslims say we don't. Who should we believe? Muslims, you, or Muhammad? Now, there's a serious problem with this because where in that hadith does it say that the Torah is the Old Testament and the Injil is the or the Gospel is the New Testament? Where does it say the Torah and Gospel is intact 100% in totality? Nowhere. Nowhere does it say that. It just says the Torah and the Gospel are with the Jews and the Christians. What is the Torah and the Gospel? Well, according to Ibn Kathir's commentary on the Quran, chapter 3, verse 3, and other verses, Ibn Kathir says that the Torah and the Gospel are, whatever remains of the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad. So when the Quran's talking about the Torah, or when the Hadith and the Quran are talking about the Torah, it's talking about the Torah that was revealed to Moses in the Quran chapter 3 verse 3, in the Quran chapter 5 verse 46, etc. Now, is the Old Testament that was canonized before Islam, before the Prophet Muhammad was born, is the Old Testament books of Genesis, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, Exodus, were they revealed to Moses? No, they weren't. They were written after Moses. Uh, Christian scholars have determined that the Old Testament books were actually written, at least 500 to 1,000 years after Moses lived. And, that's the book of Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, etc. So using this simple logic, we can see that when the Quran or the Hadith are talking about the Torah, it's talking about the Torah that's revealed to Moses. That's not the Old Testament. Same with the New Testament. The Quran or the Hadith is talking about the Gospel. Now, is the Gospel, the Gospels, plural, of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? No, it isn't. It's the Gospel that was revealed to Jesus, which is not the written Greek New Testament that we have today, like the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the epistles of Paul, the book of Revelation, like Acts of the Apostles, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, uh, the book of James. Nowhere does the Quran or the Hadith or the Prophet Muhammad or Ibn Kathir or Tabari or Qurtubi or Ibn Abbas, nowhere do these classical Muslim scholars and the Prophet Muhammad and Ibn Kathir and Al-Qurtubi and Ibn Taymiyyah, nowhere do those people identify the New Testament books with the Christians as the gospel that's mentioned in the Quran and the Hadith. The Quran says the gospel was revealed to Jesus in the Quran chapter 3 verse 3, Quran chapter 5 verse 46, etc. Now, using this simple logic, does the revealed Torah and the revealed gospel mean it's the Old Testament written after Moses? Does it mean it's the New Testament written after Jesus? No, it doesn't. So this whole argument backfires because these Christians don't understand that when the Quran's talking about the Torah and the gospel, it's talking about, the revelation given to Moses, which is not the written Old Testament books that we have today, like Genesis to Malachi, etc. When the Quran's talking about the revealed gospel to Jesus, it's not talking about the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts of the Apostles, 1 Timothy, the book of Revelation, etc. It's talking about the revealed gospel. So this simple logic is enough to refute the stupidity that the Quran confirms the Bible, because the Quran is talking about uh, revelations of Moses and Jesus. That's not the written Old Testament, and that's not the written New Testament. I mean, the fact that these Christians can't do simple logic here, or they just make up stuff and put it in the Quran, or they make the Quran say what they want it to say. Where does the Quran say Bible? Where does it say New Testament, Old Testament? Where does it say? It doesn't say that. And the reason why the Quran and the Hadith mention the Torah and the Gospel is because the Torah, as revealed to Moses, has prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad. The Gospel that was revealed to Jesus has prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad. So according to Islam, the Torah and Gospel have prophecies of Prophet Muhammad, and that's why the Quran and the Hadith mention it, because it's talking about revealed. It's talking about revelations of Moses and Jesus, which is not the Old Testament that we have today, and that's not the New Testament that we have today. Using this simple logic, we can clearly refute the idea that the Quran confirms the Old Testament and New Testament, because the Quran is not talking about the Old Testament and New Testament. It's talking about revelations given to Moses and Jesus, which does not mean written Old Testament books and written New Testament books. And just read Tafsir Ibn Kathir on what the Quran says about the Torah and the Gospel, and you'll see that when the Quran's talking about those revelations, it's talking about revelations given to Moses and Jesus, which is not the written Old Testament and not the written New Testament. Further, Ibn Kathir confirms that the Jews and Christians have corrupted their scripture. So that's the death blow, because Ibn Kathir is one of the most orthodox and classical Muslim scholars, and he confirms that according to the Prophet Muhammad and according to the first three generations of Muslims, they confirm that the that the Old Testament and New Testament is corrupt, because that was the books that were available during the time of the Prophet, or after the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And Ibn Kathir, during and after the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and Ibn Kathir is confirming that the scriptures of the Jews and Christians, which is the canonical Old Testament and New Testament books, has been corrupted. So that's the death blow to this whole argument. But again, people like David Wood and other Christians like him don't understand simple logic, and they make up stuff and put it in the Quran, or they make up their own interpretations of the Quran, which is very, very sad and which is very annoying. But again, the Quran does not say what David Wood wants it to say. Therefore, this whole argument collapses given simple rules of logic, in the fact that the Quran never mentions the words Bible, New Testament, and Old Testament. So that right there is enough to refute the idea that the Quran is talking about the Bible that we have today, because that word never is mentioned in the Quran. Stay tuned, more videos coming up ahead.